you were 4 people, so it looks like we have more people here. You do that, spread out. So since it is a small group, and since Karen will be interacting with you, answering your questions, you might want to come up, because even though we sometimes use a mic, people don't like to talk into the mic. And besides, the theater has great acoustics.
You want us to move up and touch the same game?
Okay, we're going to start, so if you guys in the back would come and sit down and fill up the seats, that'd be great.
What channel? Get me every time.
Welcome, and thank you to everybody who's here tonight who risked getting wet, soaked by the rain, to hear about the good things that are happening in Clifton Forge. We have 2 speakers tonight. Chuck Unroe, Town Manager, who will give his State of the Town update, and Karen Weber from the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. She'll talk about the small town revitalization and the bad housing inventory program announced by Chuck during last month's community gathering. Karen and her team met with a volunteer group in Clifton Forge several months ago, and we actually participated in the first bad inventory in Clifton Forge. BAD stands for brownfields, asbestos, and dilapidated buildings. Karen will give us a good overview of the program and talk about what is in store for us. Before we begin, though, I'd like to take you back to a year and a half. It was a February community gathering, and it was up in the West Rock room, and we broke into small groups. And we had a facilitator from the Department of Housing and Community Development. And the goal of the meeting was to identify the top 3 action items that we wanted the town to work on. So those 3 items, and this is in priority order, was the need for a community planning director. Number 2, a consistent branding and marketing message for Clifton Forge. And number 3, work on improving some of the areas of the town. Several of our elected officials participated in that meeting, and we always appreciate that when that happens. So what are the results? We now have Maria Saxton, who is actually here tonight as our Director of Community Planning. And several days ago, we were awarded the branding grant that Maria submitted to DHCD with input from our community gathering meetings. So, Caleb, if you could go put that slide up. We are very, very excited about that. And we're sitting here this evening to learn how we can tackle the challenges of improving some of the areas of the town. The Community Gathering Planning Committee is grateful for your suggestions, attendance, and enthusiasm for our town. Working together and working closely with town officials, we have accomplished positive things. That's the way it should work. So now I'll hand it over to Chuck.
It's a small group, but it's a dedicated group, and I have not missed one of these community gatherings since they started, and most of the faces I see here tonight have been right here every step of the way, so it is appreciated. And like Gail said, a lot of positive things have happened. They might not happen as quickly as we would like all would like for them to happen, but we are listening, and we do hear what you're saying, and we're working hard to move in that direction. And I think we've made some great strides in that. Maria is making even more strides in that direction, and some of those we'll talk about a little bit more in just a few minutes. One of the first things I want to talk about tonight, though, is through a grant that was sponsored and championed by Josh Taylor, the Executive Director of the Allegheny Highlands Chamber of Commerce and Tourism. The town of Clifton Forge was awarded 2 electric vehicle charging stations. It was decided that one would be placed at Town Hall and one would be placed at the Loop Street parking lot, which you'll better recognize that as the gravel parking lot in front of Jack Mason's. The thought process behind that was that they were on each end of our business district. While they were charging their vehicles, they could walk down the street, shop in our shops, and get a sandwich or something to eat. The first EV charging station has arrived and has been installed. It's on the town hall parking lot. It is the first publicly accessible EV charging station in Allegheny Highlands. It is now fully operational, and by using your debit, credit, or ChargePoint card, you can charge your vehicle in just 2 hours. But that's 2 hours that folks can spend in our downtown area. Our charge for this is 20 cents per kilowatt hour. And for those of you that are wondering, just like I was, a kilowatt hour is every 1,000 watts of energy used. My understanding is from the research that an average vehicle will cost somewhere between $11 and $15 to fully charge. I really didn't know if Clifton Forge would have a need for this, but it is the thing of the future. I can happily tell you that when we came here tonight, when we left Town Hall, when Mayor Irvin and I left Town Hall tonight, we had watched 2 cars plugged in and charging, and a third one backing in to be charged as we left. So it is being used, it is on the app, they know it's here, so hopefully that will generate some foot traffic and attention to our Clifton Forge area. Some of the more mundane things that we've been talking about, but I like to keep you informed on them. The waterline projects, Smith Creek waterline project, that project's been extended to October for a completion date. The West Ridgeway Street waterline project is, for all practical purposes, complete. They have one line to cut and cap next week right behind Scott Hill. Once that is completed, the project is over. Except for the paving. The paving contractor that's doing the Ridgeway Street paving is also the contractor to complete Hammond Mitchell's paving for that. And he will be here in town until that is complete. And I'm sure you've noticed that the West Ridgeway Street paving project has finally started. He will pave from the bridge where he started all the way to Roxbury Street, shoulder to shoulder. All new marking, all new manhole covers, leveled out to the gutter on each side. This is fully funded through a VDOT State of Good Repairs grant, and he will be here until that is completed. He has started at the bridge and is working east. We will keep everyone informed and notified in which particular blocks he will be working in for which week, so that you'll know that parking on the street is restricted during that time. While we're talking about the streets, you may have noticed our new lighted crosswalk marker signs. We had some complaints of people not having vehicles stop for them when they were using the crosswalks. We ordered 4 to try them to just see how they would be effective. They have been effective, and it has helped with the vehicle stopping for the pedestrians. So we have ordered 8 more, which will allow us to mark all of the crosswalks in downtown from both directions to call attention to those crosswalks and make crossing the street a little bit safer for everybody. One of the other projects that we've been talking about and working on, and this is one that Maria's been working quite a bit on, is the 600 block of Main Street. As you know, we were awarded a grant by the Allegheny Foundation to purchase some of those blighted buildings in that block with the purpose of getting them ready to sell and market to potential businesses or investors. One of those buildings has been sold to a business that's going to open in that building. The other building needed some stabilization work. New roof, cinder block and mortar repair, and a back wall to be replaced. Maria has been very successful in obtaining the grant funding to accomplish all of that work. We maintained ownership of that building because it affords us the opportunity to apply for more funding through Virginia Housing as long as the town maintains ownership of the property. The funding has been secured, a contract has been negotiated, and we expect that the work will start on that building in the next couple of weeks. And that will be a new roof, structure and roof, new back cinder block wall, and structural stability and realignment on the west wall of that building. So that'll be the first building on that block to start getting cleaned up. We're really excited about that. Some employee certifications that we've recently accomplished. At our water plant, we've had 2 of our employees at the water plant get certified that previously were trainees. Recently, Kevin Robertson, who was a trainee, obtained his Class 4 operator certification. Bill Biggs, who was also a trainee at the water treatment plant, has obtained his Class 2 operator certificate. That's a big accomplishment for him because he went from a trainee all the way to a Class 2 operator. Our plant is a Class 2 plant. He is now certified and able to run that plant, if need be, alone. So as far as operators at our water treatment plant, we have 5 employees up there. We have 2 Class 1 operators, 2 Class 2 operators, and 1 Class 4 operator who is working to move up his certification to at least a Class 2. We have highly qualified people running our water treatment plant, providing the best quality of water that they possibly can to the Allegheny Highlands. Brad Balzer, who was here with me last month, has completed his first certification class and is now a certified property maintenance official. He has been officially appointed into that position for the town of Clifton Forge through the state of Virginia. This is a new position for the town to have, and he has given me a brief explanation of what his new role is once he's certified. The role of the property maintenance official is to ensure that the minimum maintenance standards are met for the property. This includes overseeing the maintenance of equipment and systems such as lighting, HVAC, sanitation, and fire safety. The official is also responsible for enforcing the code, ensuring compliance, and maintaining the property's safety and efficiency. They also have the authority to make decisions regarding the maintenance of the property and may have the right to make changes to the property's condition as necessary. And what this does is it gives him the authority to invoke the state maintenance code, which directly addresses the condition of the paint and appearance of the outside of a building. The property maintenance official is allowed to do inspections of rental property to ensure the safety and health of the tenants is being maintained, and to hold property owners responsible for property maintenance issues. He also inspects elevators and/or reports to ensure that they are in proper working order. The PMO also has the authority to placard, which means to put a sign on or barricade structures as unsafe and require the homeowners or property owners to make proper corrections or bring the structure into compliance. So by him attaining this certification, it gives him a lot more authority to actually enforce the codes both on the local level and through the state building maintenance code. I congratulate him on that achievement. A few things that Maria is working on that I asked her if I could share with you. Some of these Gail has already touched on. She's working on a housing study specifically for the town of Clifton Forge. She's working with a consultant. They have an informational gathering planned for sometime in October. She's also working on the branding effort that Gail mentioned. They have a kickoff meeting scheduled for September the 9th, 5:30 to 6:30, which is just right before the town council meeting. The kickoff session will be held here at the theater upstairs in the West Rock room. Then everyone will be asked to move to the town hall for the council meeting, which starts at 7 o'clock. She's also working on the strategic plan. We have a comprehensive plan which was revised last year, and one of the things that came out of that discussion with the Planning Commission was we all agreed that that was a good start, but we needed a strategic plan to help us be able to put those practices and suggestions in motion to make them happen. She's working with Brian Hill and the Roanoke Valley Allegheny Regional Commission in partnership. They have selected a focus group. They will have their first meeting on September the 3rd, again, here at the theater. And that will be kind of the, I guess, the steering committee or focus group that you will bring your ideas back to council for, Marie. Is that the purpose? Or?
Yeah, it will be integrated into the strategic plan.
Okay, into the strategic plan. And then lastly tonight, we got a pretty big Fridays in the Forge coming up next week. August the 29th, it'll really be our last official Fridays in the Forge for the summer, because in September we have a summer, end of summer, early fall wrestling match on the town hall parking lot, like we had on Main Street, or Ridgeway Street last year. More to come on that. But for next Friday night, we have bluegrass music. A band called Grassroots Union is coming to perform. We have a car show from Cars Unlimited that's scheduled to be here, and they will be on display on Ridgeway Street in front of some of the shops. And we also have Shriner's Donut Trailer. That's always a big drawing card. They'll be set up in their usual spot where they set up for the Fall Festival down across the street from Jack Mason's. So come on out, have a good time, get some donuts, look at some really nice cars, and enjoy the evening. So tonight, it is really a privilege for me to get to introduce our guest speaker. She's really been an advocate to help Clifton Forge. And the first time I talked with her, she immediately said, well, I just need to come to Clifton Forge and spend some time. And she came over, we spent some time, we rode all over town. I showed her all of the places, and a lot of the places that needed help, the nicer places. And during that time, she shared with me the idea of the bad building inventory that we've been talking about. And since that time, we've implemented that process. And we've had one full day of inventory. She was back in town today working on completing some of that inventory and working on a second day. And she's here tonight to tell you a bit about the process, what it means for the town, and how we're going to move forward. Karen Weber is with the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, Brownfields Coordinator. Her topic is small town revitalization, planning for successful brownfield redevelopment. She joined the DEQ Voluntary Remediation Program in April of 2022 and transitioned to Brownfields Coordination in November of 2022. Prior to the DEQ, she worked in environmental and engineering consulting for 19 years. She has a Bachelor of Science in Geoscience and an MA in Education from Virginia Tech. She's a licensed geologist in Virginia and has extensive experience in soil, groundwater, and vapor monitoring as it relates to site investigation and risk assessments. Karen prides herself on being an ambassador through community engagement that supports and promotes site assessment and redevelopment of brownfield sites through the state, and has worked closely with stakeholders on dozens of brownfield sites funded through grants from the EPA and the VDEQ. The town of Clifton Forge has been participating in the Bad Housing Inventory Program, announced during July's community gathering for several months. It has started as a statewide initiative in West Virginia to provide technical assistance and site analysis tools to enhance abandoned and dilapidated buildings in communities. Virginia's DEQ and West Virginia's program work in conjunction with staff and students from West Virginia University to analyze and compile the data that we receive or take from these buildings that we visited, and then they will send us a series of reports, prioritization processes for these properties, and they will be back in the fall, a little later in the fall, to do a community information about what we have learned. So without any further discussion, it is my privilege to introduce to you Karen Weber.
Thank you. Sure, Delene. I'm not one to stand still though. And it sounds kind of boring what I did before. What I do now is not at all boring. And I heard Virginia Tech, West Virginia University, and one of you is wearing a UVA sweatshirt. I don't judge. Unless you're wearing a UVA sweatshirt. My dad was a double who, so we had a little rivalry going on. You win in baseball, we get football. Anyways, so there's been a number of times that the bad buildings inventory was mentioned. That is an effort that we have started with the town, but this presentation, I veered away from what are we doing specific to that and more about how do we think as Brownfields people as it relates to what we're trying to accomplish with that effort. So it's Brownfields, abandoned and dilapidated properties. What we are trying to do is capture an inventory, in part because when I met with Chuck, we drove around, he said, well, we started a vacant property registry. And I went, well, how do you know which sites are vacant? Well, we kind of know, we know our town. So, well, let's help get a list, and we can expand that list beyond your vacant properties to capture some of these brownfield sites. And I hope I'm not whistling my S's, but I feel like I am, sorry. Some of these brownfield sites, some of these dilapidated properties that might be eligible for funding. Because that's always the question, what do we do and how do we pay for it? And that's part of how Brownfields people think. If you know what you have, then you can start making decisions and create action. And all of these other activities that are getting started, your strategic plan, your housing studies, they're all intended to result in action. We don't want to just talk, we want to have some outcomes. So I don't know how to change slides from here. Go ahead and hit one more. So the Brownfields overview, there are slides in here with words. I try not to read the words because I want you to see pictures and I want to talk, and I don't want to talk at you, I want to talk with you, so I kind of feel weird that I'm way up here. Brownfields are essentially those sites that have known or perceived impact. They're generally commercial, industrial, and mixed-use sites, not residential. Sometimes it's a degree of obviousness, your old industrial property where stacks and stacks of drums of chemical usage, that's an obvious one. But there's also your Main Street building that has asbestos or lead-based paint, an old dry cleaner site. They're kind of hidden here and there. So brownfield sites are not always as obvious as we think. We always focus on addressing the risks. When we're talking about the environmental aspects of it, it's what are people exposed to? Could that create a situation where someone could get sick or be exposed to some chemical that they shouldn't? That's our mindset, is trying to address those risks that might exist. So we also want those sites that are usually either underused or unused now. Maybe they're vacant, maybe the industry's gone, they've moved away, they've left this vacant site that nobody's using. We want it to be something else. We would love for someone to go in and reuse a property that already has a utility infrastructure and transportation pathways or a rail line or something, as opposed to clearing a whole new green field and then having two sites that look like that. Reuse what's already been disturbed, what's already been used, what's already been set up. That's our goal. Something instead of nothing. I mentioned that already, so I'm going to go on to the next one. So, audience participation, please bear with me. This one should be an obvious one. I think most people know this movie, and everyone knows the line. Mom always said life is like a box of chocolates, but my favorite line from the movie is this one. Mom always said that you've got to put the past behind you before you can move forward. And a lot of these sites, they're part of your past. There was a use of the site that people have memories, they have emotions tied to it. We have to respect what it used to be, but also see what it can be. And that can be challenging. And a lot of times there's emotion with these sites. We have one I'm going to talk about in a little bit, where that was playing into the decision making. We had to kind of figure that out. So you can go to the next one. So the brownfields perspective, there are brownfields projects. That is your site. That's where we're going to do the work. That's where we're going to do some environmental assessment. We're going to do some reuse planning. We're going to try to turn it from maybe nothing or not enough to something better, something that's productive, something that creates jobs, something that's good for the community, all of those things. And then there's the brownfields program. I work in the brownfields program. And anytime we talk about a site or talk about an activity or a community outreach or some aspect of what we're going to do, we're going to look at the environmental conditions, we're going to talk about the economic potential, and we're going to address the people who are affected by the decisions that are made with the work that we're doing. That's you guys. And if we don't take all three into account, I don't think we're doing it the justice that it deserves. Decisions can be made that are not holistic. That's my opinion. And then there's brownfields people. I love the little icon because sometimes I do feel like I'm supposed to put on a superhero cape, but we're not here to save the day. The brownfields champions all wear capes like that. Those are the people that are energized, that participate, that want to learn, that want to understand, and that help these things move along. Because I'm not here to make the decisions. I'm not here to do all the things. That's where you guys come in. But sometimes I can help provide information. Sometimes I can help provide tools that support that kind of decision making. So everyone's going to have to get their capes. That can be part of your summer wrestling extravaganza. So when we look at a brownfield site, there's kind of this roadmap that we follow. And I'm sorry this is more words. The environmental part, we have to figure out what is there. What are we working with? Is it asbestos and lead-based paint? Is there tetrachloroethylene in the groundwater? That's from something that got dumped during industrial use. Is it petroleum and there's a release and it's in the water? What is there? Then we look at what does it mean? What are the risks? What are the exposures? Is it going to get into the water? Is it going to get into the building? Are people going to put a soccer field there and the kids are going to be kicking up the dirt that has something in it? You know, those are the things we're thinking about. What does it mean? And then what is the best use for that site that we can then consider for how we manage those risks? So if it wants to be a soccer field, maybe the soccer field gets 2 more feet of soil put on top, and that caps what might be under the ground. We don't have to dig it off. We don't have to spend all that money to take it away. It's no longer an exposure risk. And then we want to get the site ready for reuse. So we want to get over as many barriers as we can. And that's where brownfields comes in, and sometimes we have magic money that can be used for things, and I call it magic money, but it's this unknown resource sometimes that we can't get developers in to our old Main Street commercial spaces because they're full of asbestos, and that costs money, and nobody has the money to deal with the asbestos and then also put their restaurant equipment in. So if we come in, we find that brownfields money, and that's used to remove the asbestos, now we've taken that barrier out of the mix. And the guy that wants to put his restaurant there, so you can have a coffee shop or whatever, can just do the restaurant. And then you have a nice, commercial business, and now you have some jobs, and now you have some energy for the guy that charged his car. So that's what we're trying to do. So we're trying to think about the environmental stuff, the economic aspect, and then the people that will get to experience it. So that's our kind of roadmap. So typical brownfield site, this is what everybody thinks of. You guys have them too, everybody does. This is a former foundry. It's actually closer to me, I live in Blacksburg. Sorry, I'm just gonna heckle you right there in front with the big Virginia shirt. So up at the top is what it looks like now from, bird's eye view. And over on the left, you can see there's the white scraggly stuff. That's the concrete pad that was left from the foundry building, because that is expensive to remove. But the buildings are all gone. But the stuff that they left behind is not necessarily all gone. So there are pockets of things that need to be addressed or protected. There's a stormwater pond up at the top. So during the industrial operations, all the stuff went through the stormwater pond into the river. So, we needed to know what might be in the bottom of the pond. We needed to know what's in the soil. Over to the right, that's an old landfill site. So we know there's stuff there because we know it's a landfill. So we had all of this space. It's valuable, it's near the interstate, it's got a water body, but it's not this big job creator that it was. So how do we go back to getting this site into something that's productive? We know there are environmental conditions there, but we needed to help get information to manage those things. So that's what we're working on from the environmental perspective. This, at the bottom, brownfields money was used to help with the environmental stuff, but we also used brownfields money to do a master reuse plan. And we came up with these ideas. What would it look like with one big building, industrial building? What would it look like with 5 or 7? Is there enough parking? Are the utilities there? Is there access? These things that now they can market to commercial and industrial developers and maybe get that site back into something productive. But there's a giant slab on site, and nobody actually wants that. Even the new people, they want to build their own. So all the work that we did with our brownfields money, environmental and planning, helped this municipality receive a $3.2 million grant to remove that slab and some of the soil that had some stuff in it that's probably not best to leave on site. We wanted to get it off site. Without this, that said what we're talking about is realistic and achievable, they would not have gotten $3.2 million. So we're not gonna get it all the way there, we're gonna get it as close as we can. That's where brownfields is, that early, we don't know what to do, we don't know what's there, how do we get it there? So our hope is right now they're working on getting that slab out. They have a nice site that says, you can come and put your industry here. We can put a soccer field down by the river. We're gonna put a little greenway that people can go run, ride bikes, take their kids, and all those things. And we've addressed all these things. So it's safe, and it's accessible, and it's realistic and achievable. Next one. So then there's our community projects. Not everything is a big brownfield like that. Some of them are small brownfields. This is another site. To the right was the old bowling alley. To the left was a store front. There used to be a gas tank and fueling station, so I guess it was a gas station at some point. This part you can see is structurally intact. The back of it was not. The roof had fallen in all the way to the floor through the ground, and you could see all the basement and all the utility pipes and everything. So the building was a little bit, there were some unknowns. The bowling alley had memories. That's where I used to go as a teenager, and we would go in the back and get in trouble and make out with my boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. So those are the kinds of emotions that were tied to this building. People remembered it as this great place and part of their community. And they wanted desperately for it to be that again. But like this, it wasn't. So every time they drove by, it was just disappointing. And they wanted to figure out something. So half the town wanted to demolish it, and the other half wanted to preserve it and stabilize it. And we went in and said, well, first let's figure out what the environmental stuff that might be there. If there's anything left from the petroleum, if there's asbestos in the building, which there was, and help figure out the cost to stabilize it. So after we evaluated the structural condition of it using brownfields money, the cost to stabilize it was pretty big, and the cost to demolish it was pretty small. So they voted to demolish it. We found the more brownfields money that paid for that demolition and got rid of all the asbestos and cleared the site. Well, now they had a blank site. We don't know what to do with it. So we had to say, well, let's get it to be something. Looped in the farmers market group that had been moved around, and they said, would you guys like to have a permanent spot to park every Wednesday night? Yes, they did. And they had a lot of opinions about it. So we invited them to be part of the conversation. They worked with the planning group. We used brownfields money to help kind of vision out. Does it fit to put a building there? Is there parking? They wanted to be able to back in. Does that work? Is there space for a little community garden? How do we access the river? All of those things were part of the conversation, and said, yep, this is realistic and achievable. It may not exactly look like this when it's done, but this went in a grant application, and they got $300,000 from the Tobacco Commission to start construction. So the RFP is out now. Construction is going to start maybe next month, but very soon. It's about a year and a half for both of these projects to get them from, we don't know, to, hey, we have a vision for something that is good. And my hope is that those people that remember it as a bowling alley now go there, and maybe they still go in the back and make out, I don't know, but now it's another community beneficial space that will create new memories. They're also getting to reuse the bathrooms because there were utilities, so there's gonna be, when you have toddlers, if you've ever had to deal with that, just the fact that it will have a bathroom, I think, is huge. So those are just two examples. You can go to the next one. Of a brownfield project and how we kind of walk through. So our inventory stuff is to help identify sites like that where we might be able to step in and say, maybe we have some resources that we can use for that site in your town that is vacant or starting to lean in a bad way, or is a more obvious brownfield with some petroleum or some other contaminant or asbestos and lead paint. And maybe we can help find some resources and help you vision out a reuse for that can be accomplished in a pretty short amount of time. I'd say a year and a half is pretty short in my world order. It's very short. So what I do to help with that, and part of the inventory stuff, I'm out here, I feel like I'm on the road, I'm on tour, talking the talk, trying to find those sites that are eligible, helping to navigate the project work. So I don't like to say, hey, this is a great site, let me help you get this grant, and then go away, because that doesn't help either. So sometimes it's navigating along the way and saying, okay, you've made this decision, now are you still missing information? How do we get that information so that you can make a justified decision and you can communicate the decisions you made? Town, city, decision makers deal with that all the time. If they're not communicating it clearly to you all, sometimes you don't understand and don't feel like the right decision was made. But if enough information is there, often people will understand why a decision was made. They may not like it, but hopefully it's more beneficial. Maybe it's a financial decision that was made. Maybe it's, we got a grant for $3.2 million and now we're going to do this, and that's a great thing. And then I always am trying to help find money. And not just money for the early part, the brownfields part, but the next part. So that Tobacco Commission grant and that Business Ready Sites grant, or something from Virginia Main Street, or an Industrial Revitalization Fund grant. There's other money after when we demonstrate that what the money's being asked for is realistic. So that's what I do. I do that all the time. I spend a lot of time. So, a new roadmap. And I didn't put them all on here because I kind of was hoping maybe we could work together on this a little bit. So, the community brownfields roadmap. This is the team that we want to be part of our inventory data collection, what we're looking for to understand why we're here. And yeah, I'm from DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, and most people, when DEQ shows up, it's a stormwater inspector or a solid waste inspector, and they go, well, I don't know, maybe this is an inspection, or maybe you're here and it's not gonna be good. You know, we're not there. And those people aren't there to create problems or roadblocks either. We work with those people internally and say, hey, we have this site, we're gonna need to do some stormwater work. Let's work together and make it, you know, smooth along the way. But we have to find the champions, and those are people, you guys. So that's where your little capes, I'm saying that now, is that just by being in the room and listening to me, you're on my team, whether you like it or not. So, but it's also people outside the community. And so I come in and, no, I don't live here. I've been here, I've done a lot of work here. I just had dinner here, it was great, because sweet potato fries, and can't go wrong with that. Hopefully I have other people that agree with that. But there are other people that are coming into your space and talking about things, but you know your town, and you know the people, and you know what it needs, and you know how you remember it, but you also know how you like it to be, and the things that you enjoy. And so communicating that with those people that do come from outside of your town, I think is really important. And we're not trying to make decisions for you. So the strategic planning folks and your housing study folks and your brownfields people, we're all here just to try to say, let's make sense of it. We're just trying to help provide data or organize things and help you prioritize for whatever way that you need to, so that when you're making decisions, maybe you can pick off these small, easy things with a smaller grant and then tackle that big one. At least then action is happening, because we all want action. Okay, next one. And identifying the sites, that's our brownfields, abandoned, dilapidated, bad buildings inventory. I don't want to call anybody's building bad, it's not bad, but knowing where those sites are allows me to look at them and say, you can get a grant for that. Let's start working on it. Or here's a pathway, here's a legal pathway that you guys already have in place to kind of get some action and get some momentum, or provide some support for these sites that need a little bit extra. But we need our champions to participate in all of that. So next one. That's the prioritizing your sites. So if I was to ask you all, which I'm asking, with all the information I just said about what brownfields are and brownfields projects, you know, what are your needs? Do you want to speak up? Or do you want me to keep talking? Because I have questions and answers at the end. We'll do it at the end. Oh, you had something? Go ahead. Do you want to wait? Oh, I thought you were going to say something. We'll wait till the end. And what resources already exist? So I want you to think about those two things. You know, what things you already have. That might just be the people. Okay, next. And then there's steps 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on and so on and so on and so on, taking action. Because it never really ends. I could list out a roadmap, but you're always going to be traveling down this road. You might turn to the right here, you might turn to the left here, and it's beautiful along the way, I hope. Some of those steps involve funding. Some of them, I call them side quests. Those are your things like housing studies and strategic plans and comp plans. And I collaborate with those people, and I try to, because my information might be useful. Their information is useful to me. I will read those documents, especially a strategic plan or some sort of redevelopment plan that is community-wide, because usually there are sites there, priority sites that have already been identified. And I can come in and say, I can start working on that site for you. I can get you a little more information that might get a little bit closer. So I think those little side quests are useful, but it also means not doing it in a vacuum. I want to do it with the knowledge and understanding of other things that are going on and building the momentum of everybody's effort to enhance the community, not just brownfields. But next. So I'm almost done, I promise. Brownfield success, if you're bored, I don't know. Brownfield successes, you can go to the next bullet. This goes back to, I have to stay focused. If you're thinking brownfields or you're thinking about any of these works and it's triggered a light bulb, think about what would be the environmental condition we would need to address. What could it be that might be valuable from an economic standpoint? And who will benefit from it? Who would engage with this site? Maybe it's just kids in a soccer field, that's okay. But now you have moms and dads coming in, I guess they want to buy coffee beforehand, I'm sure they do. All of those things that are community-wide. Next one. And then utilizing the resources available. And I keep looking at Maria because she's a grant writer, and so she knows, and she's coordinating, and I'm aware of the grants, the brownfields grants that are available to your area, not just the things that I have access to, but Allegheny Highlands and other community-wide grants and other grants that wouldn't normally be available to a site unless it's a brownfield. That $3.2 million grant, that grant had a 100-acre site requirement, but that site was only 88 acres, and because it was a brownfield, it wasn't held to that 100 acres. They were eligible just because it was a brownfield. So those little quirks that are hidden in there, I try to know about those things, and I just say phone a friend, and I can be your friend, and I think Chuck knows to pick up the phone and call and ask those questions. But take advantage of it as much as you can. It's not always easy for a town to say, I'm going to take on this big grant, because you got to manage the grant, you got to do the reporting, you got to keep track of the dollars. So sometimes the money that I have, where I'm managing the grant part, but it's the same money, and so if we can just throw it out from different directions, we can make it work. And it can be a small site like a bowling alley or a big site like a foundry. And state-backed funding. So that's the last funding I'm going to talk about. And then, of course, building off of these local things. There's one more bullet, I think, chutes and ladders. I did a presentation the other day, is how is a brownfield project like playing a game of chutes and ladders? And it's that you start the game and you are moving forward. And sometimes you get a really big boost and things go well and things go quickly. And other times you get a little bit of a, oops, I went down a slide, something didn't come through, maybe it's money, or something fell apart, or your developer ran away, or you couldn't get equipment because of whatever reason, something that happens. But you never go all the way back to the beginning. You just get a little setback, and then you just keep prodding along until you get to the end. That's how brownfields projects work. We try not to ever give up on a site. So it's a lot like playing chutes and ladders. Next slide. The primary source of funding that I will champion and cheerlead about all the time is this Virginia Brownfields Assistance Fund. That's what we call it. And I say that because DEQ is 2/3 of the vote, but it is at the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. They are the incentive agency for the state, so they manage the dollars, they manage the paperwork, and I just get to look at the grants and talk about the sites. But it's an easy, relatively easy grant to get, and it can be that critical early investment. When you don't know what's there and you don't know what it's going to be, we can use this funding a lot of times to kickstart. Now, it's not for residential properties. It's not for private owners. So, an individual can't apply for a grant under this program. But working with the town or Economic Development Authority or Planning District Commission, they can apply for the grant. And that's where prioritizing sites is really important. Because it might be a small site, but it can still be a priority that's worthy of getting a grant because you can accomplish something easily. And so having laid out those prioritization, metrics, you can really identify places for brownfield, for VBEF grants to work. Clifton Forge has had 3. They had 2 of them in 2017. And that was for the CSX site down the way when it was the rail yard and only the stack was left behind in the buildings, and then it wasn't being used, and now it is the salt storage. That, when it was developed, got 2 VVAF grants to help address the environmental conditions on the site and help to further that redevelopment a little bit faster, a little bit easier, and take some of the burden off of that developer with the, you didn't put this stuff here, but you're taking it on, and in return, we're gonna support you by getting these grants and helping you. Then there weren't any until just recently, June of this year, the 3rd Clifton Forge VBAF grant. And now it's on their radar. And I guarantee there will be others because we've already started doing some prep work for some sites that have been identified through our bad buildings inventory and through just driving around and through realizing that brownfields money is not just an environmental site assessment, it's also planning, it's also asbestos surveys, it's also, you know, helping overcome those barriers, maybe a structural survey. It's many of those things. This is a great resource. So I think you will see more of these in Clifton Forge moving forward. I think that's the end. That's me. Feel free. I'm sorry I can't offer those grants to everybody, but you can help be part of the, how do we prioritize? What do we need? Questions? I kept getting closer and closer to the edge. So I was afraid they had me on video.
You know, one thing throughout the entire county, there is a need for housing. Yet this town is full of, I'm sure Covington's the same way, full of a lot of houses that are uninhabitable. And that cannot be used for, funds cannot be used for housing. How does one address that when you have a resource, you have places to put houses, but there's no reason to develop here? So what can you do about dilapidated properties?
It's a challenge that I face every day. The inventory work that we're doing is the only space that I'm working in right now where I can capture data of residential properties that are abandoned, blighted, dilapidated, and by helping to collect that data and the ability to share it and say, there's a need, and I have some data that demonstrates the need, and Virginia Housing has data that demonstrates the need, then it supports going to legislature and saying, we need demolition money. We don't have a demolition fund. You know, I'm trying to get data that I can share in the hopes that there becomes a resource to address those things. VBAF can be used for sites where the outcome is workforce housing. So maybe it was an old commercial property and it's being cleared, and now they're gonna put in some affordable housing or workforce housing. So we can cross over just a little bit, and we can assist with mixed use sites where there's commercial and residential. So we have a little bit of a way to dialogue in those things, but the individually, privately owned residential properties, brownfields is not usually the money that you can go to for that, but by capturing some of that and trying to share it. I will say we did an inventory effort in Narrows, Virginia. I don't know if you know where that is, Giles County, almost West Virginia. Before we were even done, they had taken our list to Habitat, and Habitat agreed to 2 of those sites to take them down and build some new houses. So I didn't even know he was doing that, but you know, here we had collected some data that was valuable, and there it was in print for him to use for leverage. So I don't have a good answer because it is a universal challenge, but I'm part of that broader team of statewide agencies that's trying to get data pulled together and demonstrate the need. So.
You asked earlier about what does the town need? Okay, I would recommend retail shopping. You know, more than, I don't have anything against the dollar store and Family Dollar and things like that, but you know, something that's above that. We also used to have a fancy restaurant in town that was talked about, and people would come for 50, 100 miles to come to that restaurant, and it's been empty for a number of years. And I have a friend of mine constantly suggesting a supply store for hairstylists and other people who, you know, are barbers and you know, beauty shops and things like that. Something that would do the shopping and be the middleman that would help them.
So from the Brownfields perspective, our goal is to help create the spaces and make sure that the spaces are ready and reusable for those small, independently owned businesses that come in and take some of the expenses out of that daunting, expensive looking redevelopment, you know, renovation project, and hopefully that supports other initiatives and other incentives that the town might offer to say, come to our Main Street community. Then there's what is your economic draw? And right now, a lot of communities like this, it's drawing on the ecotourism. Those people that want to come from Northern Virginia and pay to play in the spaces that, where I live, I just take the fishing rod down with my kid and we just go jump in the creek and we go fishing. But there's an outfitter down the road and people come and they pay $400 to go in a boat, you know, to get somebody to take them fishing. So then taking advantage of what might be around to bring those people in, and your rebranding effort, I think, is good also. It's going to get it out there and highlight, here's Clifton Forge. Come see us and see what we have to offer. So I think all of those things kind of play together, but when it comes to where do I put my barber shop, that's where, call me if it's full of asbestos and lead paint, I'll see if I can clear it out for you. And then that person can hopefully get in. And maybe you can give them a little bit of facade assistance to fix the broken glass on the front so that they can put up their sign. It's a lot of little things that come together and hopefully result in somebody coming back and saying, I can own a restaurant here and raise my family and be able to afford it. You know, that's what we want. So that's the small town aspect of this. Where does Brownfields fit in that? It's kind of hidden in really weird places, but we can't do it on our own. So I would love to see all those things, and I will come and go to that restaurant. Let me know. I want to go all ribbon cuttings. So, yes.
Back to the earlier point that Dave was making about residential. I think that one of the challenges that we have had, and I was at that original discussion about what do we need, is the messaging that residential and commercial, it's not an or, it's an and. Mm-hmm. And getting people to understand that there's joint momentum, that's shared momentum across both of those different constituencies that will help move us forward. It's not, well, we're just going to do commercial first because of the brownfields money, but we have to do it in a coordinated way with both, so that people don't just say, well, what about all the broken down houses, as opposed to, okay, how do we fix this collectively?
And sometimes it's, how do you make it walkable if you have Main Street, so that it's not just the Main Street strip, but everything around it starts to kind of build as well, and then you have sidewalks, and then you have access. And I agree, it's how people engage with these sites that's as important in the decision making as addressing the site itself. And so I try not to put my blinders on, and I say, we tend to look at a map, or look at a drawing, or look at a site, and we forget to do this. And just look around and what's around you, and what do you see from this property? And the bowling alley site, they had cleaned up their depot. It's now a little museum and a community space. And then there's the railroad, because there's always a railroad. And then there's the commercial warehouse building, and then there's our site, and then there's the river. You know, all the typical things you have, your railroad, you got your river, you got your warehouse. So now the depot is done, and the bowling alley site is gonna be your farmer's market, and we all went this warehouse district stretch. So they got a community design block grant to help vision out what that strip is gonna look like. And so we did the outside pieces because they were manageable and achievable. And now we're gonna get that middle piece, and the whole block together is gonna become much more productive. And have some commercial spaces and some residential uses on some of the upper level. But it takes time and it takes a lot of energy. It's a pretty big cape. So, and I'm not the only one wearing it, that's for sure, so. Anything else? Any other questions? It's the why your brownfields person is here. Well, thank you for letting me chat with y'all. I appreciate it, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Chuck. Karen, if you could stay around for a few minutes, there might be a few more questions from everybody. And could you give us kind of a summary of where we are as far as houses that have been reported and the next steps?
So, you know, because brownfields is commercial, industrial, mostly and mixed use, we've tried to capture most of that, and looking at residential properties, focus is more on those vacant properties, and addressing those where there isn't necessarily, and a lot of times those are absentee owners. And so that's a dialogue that we're continuing to have, but mostly it's just putting some eyes on things and taking some notes and putting down some thoughts. We're still in the process of capturing kind of the putting eyes on things, but we're not making any decisions or judgments. It is very prescribed, and the idea is the next step will be to bring people back together and say, hey, these are the buildings that looked really rough. Let's talk about them. Because when we say, you know, this commercial building or even this vacant house, somebody always go, oh, that's so-and-so's house, and his son, you know, inherited it after he passed away, but his son lives in Georgia, and, you know, they know that information. And we say, well, how do we get in touch with that person who lives in Georgia and let them know that their house is not looking so great? And what can we do to, you know, to find pathways for the town to take some action if they need to, or create incentives or whatever those things are. So the next step will be, we'll put it all together with some behind the scenes data collection, looking at GIS and ownership records and things of where people are and trying to identify those scenarios. Then we'll come back together and we'll talk about prioritization. And what is your, you know, most important priority might be housing. Well, how do we prioritize some of these sites where we can get some money that also will address housing needs, or what other things do you need to do to address the house? You know, we'll talk about the priorities of your community and help kind of rank the sites. And then we'll then say, of those, VBAF, we can get you a grant for that one right there, right away. Or we have a friend over at Virginia Main Street. Let's get you on the phone with them and see if we can't get some, you know, incentives moving in that direction from those folks. That's part of the conversation that'll be had. And it's not meant to be a static document. The idea and the hope is that it creates some action that people are held a little bit accountable for, so that you say, hey, remember when we talked about those 3 sites? What happened with those? Have we made any momentum? So the next step is probably in about a month or so, we'll start to talk about scheduling that prioritization community meeting. So it might be 2 months from now when we have the meeting, but I think in another month or so, we'll be ready to talk about the sites that we have and make sure that we have all the data that we need from the town to put it on maps and put it in print.
Great, that sounds good. Thank you so much for being here, and to our audience, let's thank Chuck and Karen again. And don't forget, September 9th, the kickoff, 5:30 to 6:30 up in the restaurant room.
We're done. Not a big
Don't forget your derby.